to be very interesting today, what we're going to learn from First Watch Cyber Solutions, one of our very trusted partners in the cyberspace, who has a extremely interesting ecosystem that you're going to learn about today. And there's a lot of components that this supplier brings to the table for us as as MSPs, as well as for clients and alike. And it's a very interesting solution. And we're going to showcase some things today. And again, I'm going to hand it off here in a moment to John Martin, who is the founder and CEO of First Watch. And he's going to introduce his team and talk a little bit about things. And then we're going to dive right into the presentation. You're going to get to kind of actually see how things are done. So it's going to be very interesting today. So John, take it away. And thank you for doing this with us and educating our partners on some of the solutions that you guys provide.
You're welcome, Wade, and really want to thank you for organizing this, and I want to welcome all the attendees. At First Watch, with John Minotti and Fabian, you've got part of our team is 20-year cyber experts. Give you an idea, this team entered the 2022 MITRE Live MDR competition. Palo Alto, Microsoft, oh my gosh, who else, Fabian? CrowdStrike, and they were the only team that was able to accomplish 100% detections and 0 false positive. So I think first I would like to introduce now Fabian, give Fabian a little bit of background on him, and then he'll introduce John Minotti. So as I mentioned earlier, both Fabian and John are 20-year cyber experts. And Fabian worked at Raytheon, Access Data, both offensive and defensive cyber at the FBI, other intelligence agencies, DARPA, and he heads up our team. And I believe today you're going to get some valuable information to help not only your MSP, but also your clients. And Fabian, why don't you go ahead and introduce John, and if you want to add more to your background, go ahead, and same with John as well. So again, thank you, and I'm confident you're going to get some valuable information today.
Thank you, John. Fabian, before you do that, let me also put out there that any Q&A, just type it into the chat if you have any questions, and then we'll pass them on. And then as we wrap up the presentation here, as you know, through the registration, there's going to be basically a portion where we're going to do some challenge questions, and there's some rewards for that as well. So Fabian, take it away. Thank you so much.
So thanks, Wade, and thanks to John for the nice warm welcome. So like John said, I have 20 years of experience in the cybersecurity space. Actually started my career as a contractor working for the FBI, doing a lot of stuff with encryption and being able to break into encryption. After that, I moved on to go work at DARPA, where I was able to do a little bit more of the cutting edge research around the offensive cyber operations part of the community, and then went on to work in the intelligence community, doing more of the defensive side of the work, doing insider threat programs, looking at people that may be doing nefarious stuff to our own government. And then after that, like John said, I went to go end up working at Raytheon. So I went to a small business that got bought out by Raytheon, and then I ended up running their digital forensics incident response program there, and then spent the most of my career here recently just doing IR type work, so incident response, malware analysis, memory forensics, doing deep dive forensics on the defensive side. And then I'll introduce John Minotti, who comes with a wealth of information as well. John, you want to give a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Fabian. Hello, everybody. My name is John Minotti. I started my career assisting Texas law enforcement in performing forensic acquisition and analysis. And over the years, I've worked for companies such as Access Data and Guidance Software, using tools such as FTK and NCASE, other tools as well, like Magnets Axiom. From there, I moved into incident response and MDR and worked for companies such as Symantec and OpenText using EDR and SIM platform tools. And now I'm on the First Watch team as the Director of Managed Security Services. Um, Thank you and welcome to our webinar.
Awesome. So I'm not going to bore everyone here with stats on ransomware, and just so everyone knows, ransomware is on the uptick. It's continuing to grow. There's no stop of there's no indication that it's going to stop. It's going to continue growing year after year. But more importantly is just wanted to do a level set to make sure everyone understood what ransomware is. And the screenshot which you actually see on the screen, that's what people would call the boom. I'm not sure if you're familiar with left a boom and right a boom, but boom's when the actual incident happens. And so that'd be like the actual ransomware attack. And later in the slides, we'll go a little bit more on the deep dive of what should be done on the left of boom and what's typically done on the right of boom. We really want to focus more on what it means for the MSP space, just because we understand the difficulties and the challenges that you have when we have to monitor the IT space for your clients, and it's not just one network, but it's multiple networks across multiple vectors, and what applies to that. So ransomware itself is a piece of malicious software. So malware stands for malicious software that actually goes in and encrypts the files so that you can't see the data. You can no longer open it. Um, you can't access that data, and typically they hold it for payment to try to get your data back, and that's how they make their profits. Um, and so I'll turn it over to John to be able to give a little background on. There's some stuff called scareware out there that we're seeing that tries to impersonate ransomware, but I'll turn to John to give a little bit more of a deep dive on that.
Yes, so the scareware tactics are basically you're out doing your thing on the internet, and then all of a sudden you start getting these pop-ups that tell you that your files are being encrypted or some other message like that. But it's really trickery. Nothing's really getting encrypted on the machine. It's just a mechanism to try to get you to call up a phone number and give a credit card number and make a payment to release something. But it's just like it says, it's scareware. So nothing's really happening on the machine other than you're getting these little pop-ups threatening, these threatening pop-ups and telling them that they'll release the files once you make a payment. So that's basically what scareware is.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Um, and then want to go over this is important, the evolution of ransomware. So we'll touch on them. There's a lot more than what's here on the timeline, but really going to focus more on the evolution of it, how we've seen malware change from the beginning of time to what we're seeing today. Um, and because a lot of this on the way the attacker hits you with the ransomware also dictates on what's going to occur on the right of boom, on part of your recovery process, what you need to look for. And so initially we started with the AIDS Trojan. This was the first ever documented ransomware in 1989. The AIDS Trojan was created by a biologist who actually handed out 20,000 infected drives to attendees at the World Health Organization AIDS conference. The discs were labeled AIDS information, introductory diskettes. And then, John, you want to provide a little bit more detail on the AIDS Trojan,
Yeah,
first
yeah.
documented
So
ransomware?
yeah, and so this was, I guess, could be considered another type of trickery or scareware, if you would. What this did was once it was loaded on the individual machines, it would actually sit there with a counter and count the number of times that the computer was booted. And then after it hit a certain number of times, it would just automatically hide all of the directories on the C drive and then give you a list of scrambled names for the file names. Well, you knew that wasn't ransomware because you're still able to use the computer. But at the time, a pop-up would pop up and then you would get a little message asking for money. And this is really the beginning of cyber extortion, which leads into the more serious ransomware, which we'll talk about next with CryptoLocker.
No, thanks, John. And so crypto lockers really is where ransomware got put on the scene. I remember it being at Black Hat that first year when it happened in 2013, and it was one of the big talks there. And this was actually the first piece of ransomware that actually was using compromised sites or sending emails, your phishing emails to get people to click on it. And so this would be where there would be an attachment um, to an email where somebody would send you a malicious document that may have embedded macros. Some of the sophisticated ones, threat actors out there, you'll see them actually use something where they call them a 0 day, and they have an exploit in it, meaning when you double click the file, it automatically runs and executes the payload that they want it to. The embedded macros requires a little bit more user interaction where they have to click on it. We're actually going to show you an example of that later on in the presentation, where you can see the macros having to be enabled for the badness to happen. The one thing about CryptoLocker, it was the true first stage. A lot of the encryptions that they had were actually hard coded encryption, and they used certain keys. So a couple months after it hit, we started having white hackers. White hats. So those are really the good people on the outside that are trying to make the community stronger and better. Actually obtained those keys, and they released it to the public so people could tame their data again. And then in 2016, we actually saw where it started to migrate and become more of a business model. Where in 2016 we have what we call RAAS, which is ransomware as a service, and that's where people could actually reach out to different groups and sell it, and it became this commodity and an actual business model. And then moving into 2017 was WannaCry, which was the first global ransomware where we actually saw them attacking, hitting people worldwide, um, across the board. But the biggest thing here is on in 2019, um, is really where we start to see a change, right? Because so from 2013 to 2017, a lot of that was them sending phishing emails, or they may have had their malicious code sitting on a compromised web server, or it could have been through malvertisement. So you go to your favorite website and there's ads on there. Sometimes those ads are compromised, and you can go to it and get infected. So it was pretty much you click the initial infection vector, whether it be an email, compromised site, it runs it, and then you get infected. In about 2019, we actually saw the methodology shift, and that's when we actually started to see where threat actors would gain access to the environment. They would start to move laterally throughout your environment, um, usually go to the domain controllers, dump usernames and passwords, collect all that information, and then they started to exfiltrate data. And then the last step is they would hit you with the ransomware. So that sometimes we would see that where that'd be a 2 week period to a 2 to 3 month period that they're in your environment, which these are actually a lot harder to clean up from. Just because they go and put persistent mechanisms and backdoors and hide places into your backups. So it is a lot harder to recover. But once you do get hit with the ransomware, and you have the oh moment when you see all your files encrypted, they thought they had you because they had exfiltrated data. And now they come back to you and say, okay, well, if you don't want us to release these files to the public, you have to pay us. Um, and so that was a big shift. And then in 2021, um, for everyone that had Kasei at the time, heard about this and did have some scare, right? Is where the threat actor actually targeted your supply chain, right? Your RMM tool that you use to monitor all your endpoints, that's ensuring that everything's getting its updates and patches. That's actually what got compromised, and they did like a smash and grab, and they were just trying to hit everyone with Kaseya, just infecting them instantly with ransomware, which it's tough because it happens across a large base of your clients, but it's easy, a little bit easier to clean up than somebody that was in your environment all the time. Um, just because they don't have a deep of a foothold typically on those types of situations. And then a little bit up about current day, we're actually seeing the combination of the two. We have seen it still where threat actors are going into people's environments when we do IR investigations for them. We'll see them in, they had been in there for a while, moving around laterally, trying to get usernames and passwords. And then we've also seen the flip side, where we've seen them trying to come in through vendors, through some of their suppliers or vendors that they work with. And on those situations, we typically see it where they give them an email, a phishing email, and when they click it, that's actually just pulling down the ransomware and trying to encrypt them right away. And so, with that being said, we'll move on to the next slide. And so this one here is really talking more about the stats around how long it takes to recover from a ransomware attack once it actually happens. And some of these timelines really depends on the type of ransomware that you got hit with, whether it's something where they've been in your environment uh, for quite a while, from gathering information, putting backdoors in there, hiding pieces of malware, maybe in your backups, to someone that did a smash and grab. But I'm going to turn it over to John to talk about this a little bit more in detail.
Sure. Thanks, Fabian. So, in a moment, we're going to talk about what happens before, during, and after a ransomware attack. Now, depending on how well you do with the preparation steps before a major incident, determines where you end up on this chart that we see on the screen. So, when we talk about the recovery times, we've got a couple of scenarios that we can cover to make that point. So, in this first one, the 1 to 2 week scenario, this could be a targeted attack or a smash and grab going after one machine. Once the attack has been contained, the MSP is going to assess the damage and then works to prioritize the recovery. But even if the MSP team is using good verified backups and up to date gold images for restoration, getting operations back to normal can still take an average of about 21 days. Now, in that 2 to 4 week scenario and beyond, we can assume that the attackers have been in the environment for some time. They've probably exfilled data, they've encrypted some backups, they've established persistence, and so on. Now, under an attack in this scenario, the MSP is going to work to recover and restore data using what is left of any backups they can find. If the gold images are outdated, they're going to need additional time to patch them after they're installed. And in this scenario, your recovery time can easily stretch to 2 to 4 weeks. Now, after the 4 weeks, if the client is not operational, then the situation becomes critical. Now, at this stage, your recovery is likely hindered by encrypted backups and gold images. The MSP personnel do what they can to try to salvage any usable data so they can manually restore systems. All of this is very time consuming and it carries a great risk of reinfection if something gets missed during the cleanup, like a scheduled task or something like that. Now, as we see in all of these scenarios, the speed and effectiveness of any recovery is going to really depend on how prepared you are. It's going to depend on the policies and procedures you have in place, the backup procedures that are in place, and then, of course, the tools that are available for accessing those backups and gold images. Now, next, Fabian is going to talk about the boom where a ransomware attack occurs.
Yeah, thanks, John. And so, boom again is the infection, the actual attack happening. So we want to talk a little bit before, so the left of the boom, and so this is all of your preparation side, right? And so ideally that would be today for you and for most clients before they get attacked. And so, really it's not the super shiny stuff to do. I know it's tough. I'll be honest with you. Working in the cyberspace, I love doing the boom and doing after the boom, the incident response, the threat hunting, looking for additional malware out there, identifying it. It's exciting. It's tough for it's a lot of chaos going on at one time, right? But really, what helps you on the right of boom is what you take care of before the boom. And so, with that being said, is your preparation phase. It's tough a lot of times. I know for me to do that writing of it, but it's truly important. And so, initially, is starting with an incident response plan, documenting that. Trying to understand, all right, who are the stakeholders, who's involved, what do we have to do when we get hit with the ransomware or any type of attack. Really, you want to be able to cover that in your incident response plan. Secondly, you want to be able to delve, develop and maintain policies around your incident response plan, right? So, how often are you doing backups? Who has accesses, right? Who should have admin accesses? Should everyone have admin access, or should only one? Ideally, right? Only the system administrators would have admin access, and then on even on that they should have two accounts, right? The admin account and then their standard account that they can get privilege escalation when they needed to. um, attaining technology, right? So, like for to reduce phishing email, getting an email filtering system, right? Whether it be something like Proofpoint or another product out there that does that email protection, scanning them and checking them of coming in. Ideally, you'd want to have an EDR and an EPP, which is an EPP is your next gen antivirus that you can manage across the entire client base. An EDR is an endpoint detection and response tool. So this gives you the visibility on the endpoint to pull processes, network connections, files, registry rights to gather an understanding of what's going on those systems. Um, and then when you go to step two, well, and remember we call these out of step one, step two, but remember it's an ever living life cycle, right? So it's really a circle where they each feed into each other. You can go back and forth. But what we'll focus a little bit on your security posture because we're diving into EPPs and EDRs. Um, and ideally, right, you want to have that continuous monitoring, which, for example, would be a managed detection and response service where they're continuously looking at all your clients, ensuring because even if you have the best security stack and antivirus, it is tough for security appliances to catch everything, and so that's where the MDRs are where you're going to have more of that human element where they can look for those living off the land techniques, right? So where threat actors are using executables that are on standard Microsoft operating systems to be able to move laterally or to move from one machine to another. That's typically pretty hard for EPPs and next gen antiviruses to detect. Secondly, enabling multi-factor. That is huge, especially when it comes to email. That significantly reduces your business email compromises. Um, because when we're talking about ransomware, um, for the most part, we've seen where threat actors try to get in is A, through a phishing email, B, and you do see compromises sites every once in a while where somebody browses to a site and they get infected. But another big factor is actually your business email compromises where people are using O365 all the time. And so there's other hacks out there. People's usernames and passwords are out on the dark web. People don't change them. There's that human behavior again, right? That people will reuse passwords, and so unfortunately, um, they say in about 99% of business email compromises come from stolen credentials or where they don't have multi-factor turned on, and so that significantly reduces and reduces your attack surface on where the threat actors can come in from. Secondly, you want to be doing is vulnerability scans, whether it be quarterly or biannually or yearly. Um, these vulnerability scans are going to tell you what applications on your network are vulnerable. And so that's another way that threat actors and ransomware actors can get in is if you have an application exposed to the internet that has a known vulnerability or hole, if you will, and you're just opening up these holes in your network for threat actors to get in. um, Another big one that we see is where people will have RDP exposed to the internet. That one is another trend where we'll see threat actors either trying to brute force it or doing a dictionary attack to get in. And then RDP isn't the most secure protocol out there. So we have seen them take advantage of that greatly. Um, one last thing on the security posture. These are very fruitful, and we have seen clients benefit tremendously from it. Are actually tabletop exercises, and so even just playing the scenario of walking through of okay, when we get hit with the ransomware, what do we do? Who's getting involved? Do you have legal involved? What groups are coming in? Who's your IR team? And then you also want to play the scenarios of if you have one IT person, right, and he's the main person that controls everything. What if they're out on vacation? What if they're out um, on a cruise somewhere where you can't get a hold of them? What's your backup plan to be able to cover all that information? And so, tabletop exercise really do play a key part. in getting prepared and understanding for these ransomware attacks or any attack really after the boom. So you have a structure and an understanding where to go. Um, and it helps build your IRP, right? Your IRP should be an ever living document where um, um, after the tabletops, you start to understand, okay, this is where we could improve our structure. This is where we could improve our visibility. These tools we need to add in, or these certain people need credentials from different organizations within your environment. Um, and then with that, I'll turn it over to John to cover a little bit about the backups and that information prior to the boom.
Yeah, so backups, of course, are a very important step in on the left of the boom. And just like you have your IRP policies, you want backup policies as well. So you want policies that around when you want backups to run, how you're going to test them. You want to make sure that you're backing up the critical data and you're not missing anything. Other parts to that, you want to make sure that you're scheduling regular backups, incremental backups, and then full backups. And you want to make sure that that's done consistently over time. And then the most important part of that is testing those backups. You want to have a policy in place to where you're testing them either weekly or bi-monthly or something like that. But obviously, having a good policy around how you're going to do your backups and test them to make sure that they're accessible in an emergency is very important. Is a very important part of the left of the boom steps. Now, there's different ways you can store backups. You can use mutable backups, where immutable backups, where data is written to those cloud storages once, and it can't be overwritten. So that's one way to protect them. You can air gap your backups or back them up to other devices that aren't always connected to your network. You can use cloud type backups, and then there's other ways to protect them using encryption and stuff like that, two-factor to get to them. But it should be absolutely part of the left of the boom policies when you're writing this stuff up.
Awesome. Thanks, John. And so now the actual ransomware has occurred, and so now we're right at boom. So what do you do, right? Ideally, at this point, especially being an MSP, right? Um, you play the percentages on. Not every client's going to need 100% of your time all the time, right? And so depending on whether it's a widespread attack or an individual, you're going to either have one client or multiple clients coming and talking to you, asking you what's happened, what's wrong with their files. You're going to have hysteria happening across the client base, right? So how do you account for that? And so a lot of this goes back to where if you doing the tabletop exercises really come into play, right? Where do you get surge support? Do you have partnerships with other MSPs to help influx on influxes like this? When it comes to the cybersecurity side, this is where ideally you would bring in an incident response team. So a team that's going to come in, most likely deploy an EDR agent across the network for you to be able to. Ideally, they want to identify the initial infection vector. Kill all the malicious processes, clean up anybody that may have compromised credentials. They want to go back to the domain controller to see if username and passwords were stolen, if they need to do a full password reset across the entire site. You're going to see that. And then in conjunction, so typically you'll see your IR team come in. They'll do some monitoring for you for about 30, 45 days. And then during that time you're restoring your machines, and when you restore the machine you want to make sure you have that continuous monitoring just to ensure that they didn't embed a malicious payload in your backup, so when you think you're going back to a clean state, and you may not be really because they embedded a malware in that backup. So that's where it's important to have that continuous monitoring. And so a lot of times you'll see the transition from the IR team, and they'll pass it over to an MDR team, and it goes typically around that 45-day mark is what we've seen. And while you're restoring it, you want to make sure you have that continuous monitoring. And ideally, you're going to find out from your MDR team or the incident responders, the ones doing the actual work, to identify. All right, how did the threat actor get in? What was the who, what, when, where, why around it? Did they exploit anything? If so, you want to make sure you patch those systems. If you're restoring from an old image, making sure you're repatching again on those systems so that, let's say, if they took advantage of Adobe, or if you had a vulnerable web server out there, that you're patching that and hardening your system so that they don't get reinfected, and you can close those holes so you're not being exposed anymore. And secondly, right, there's a lot of this stuff on the restore side on the MSP that we skipped over, but it's a how do you restore those backups? Have you done a full restore with your backup data, and do you test it quarterly? So have you tried to boot up a cold machine and try pulling backups, and seeing if you can get it to a known good state on that, especially if you have incremental backups. How long is it since your last incremental backup? Are you pulling from cold storage? Are you storing it on tape drives, to be able to restore that? And so some of that is good stuff that you want to test on the left of boom. So when it actually happens and you have to reproduce it here on the right of boom, you know that it's going to be successful, and that you can do it. And then of course there's always the things that people forget about, right? Is hard drives do fail, and for somehow some reason hard drives always know when to fail at the worst possible time, right? So when you're restoring a server, a hard drive may fail. Do you have extra drives? Do you have enough space to pull down all the backups that you may have from the cloud or tape drive or offline storage to store it, to apply it to the servers, to bring it up? And so there's a lot of processes and checks that go within that restoring systems. Um, and then lastly, the at the end of this, ideally you want to have a true lessons learned with your team and all the stakeholders that are involved, and have an understanding of what happened, what could have gone better, and then you go back to your IRP, your incident response plan, and make those updates so that you're stronger for the future. But I know we're running short on time. John, anything you want to add before we jump into the video? Because we want to show you a real world ransomware attack on how it goes from start to finish, and how we can restore your data within a few clicks of a button.
Yeah, no, the only thing I would say is the lessons learned. You're always learning lessons. So after every incident, you're always going to go back through and update your policy. So it'll always be something different, but you want to make sure that you go back and do those updates just to make sure that when you see that incident again or something similar, you're much better prepared for it.
So ransomware rollback, what is it? So it's essentially what you see here on the screen. On the left, you have your known good files, your actual files that you have during business operation. The boom happens, you get hit with ransomware. Now they're all encrypted, you can't see them. And then with the ransomware rollback feature that we use within Sentinel-1 is what you see on the right-hand side of the screen, is where those files were able to be restored prior to the ransomware state. So you're not going to lose that data. Business operations can continue. It's an enormous cost savings, especially if you think about all the stuff that took place prior in the presentation about having to back up systems. You're still going to have to clean it up, but we want to show some of the benefits around having that continuous monitoring, how you can reduce the dwell time, how you can reduce the amount of work effort that's required to really bring down cost savings from the human side, as well as time spent business operations to continue, so money's not lost, and to preserve the data. So we'll jump right into our videos so that we can walk through it real quickly. So what you see here on the left is actually a phishing email from that somebody would be getting. Um, And then on the bottom left-hand side is actually Kali. So that'll be the threat actor, will they'll have their command and control to be able to do some of their actions. And what you're seeing here is actual phishing email with embedded macros that a suspecting user would get. That's why we do emphasize a lot on security awareness training, looking for the benefits of threat actors. Ideally, not clicking on enabling macros, but this one does have embedded macros in there that are malicious, and it required the user to click it. And so what you actually see on the bottom left-hand server of the interpreter session is, as soon as they enable the macros, you saw the connections occurring and the badness going out. And so on the right hand side within our Sentinel platform that we use, you can actually see that we instantaneously picked up the malicious Word document. And then in here, you can see all the threat indicators that we were able to identify. Where did it come from? In the on the middle of the screen, you can actually see where it says Outlook, so you can see what the originating process was, so that we would know that it came from a phishing email to be able to identify that. Um, John, anything else you want to add on this?
No, just real quickly, what you just saw was the user seeing that nothing happened in the Word document, so they closed everything down, hoping that nothing bad was going to happen. But obviously, that's not the case because the attacker now's got everything that they need. So now, Fabian, do you want to go ahead and run through the attack here?
Yeah, I will. I know we're short on. So right now, the threat actor is just running the attack, all the automation on the back end. They're getting it up and running, and they're pulling down the malicious payload to start running the actual encryption. Since I know we're short on time, I'm going to jump to the next video to just show a little bit of what we can see after the initial attack. But that shows how the user fell for the phishing email, double clicked it. But within our visibility of the platform here is going to show you a nice overview of, all right, once Word was executed, we saw the macros, which actually pulled down another executable that actually ran a lot of commands on the system. So, for example, it spawned uh, a command prompt that ran "Who am I?" so that they could find out what type of user it is. And then this gives us the full information, and then you can see actually spawning the other executable to go back and talk to the interpreter so that they could have command of that system. Um, and then let me show one last video where you can see the actual ransomware recovery taking place in a matter of a few clicks. So right here now, at the stage, all of our files have been encrypted. They changed the desktop to show that our files have been encrypted. You see the screen where none of those files are visible, and we can't access it. And so in the Sentinel-1 platform, the team can easily just go select the threat, and then it gives us a couple options where we can do remediation. You can kill a process, you can quarantine the file, remediate it, deletes it from the network, from the system, and then that rollback is actually the ransomware rollback, where it's going to restore the files to a known clean state. Um, and then if it's on multiple instances, let's say if it happened across multiple machines or across multiple networks, in one click of a button, we can restore all the machines that were affected. That's what that last checkbox is showing, where it says apply to all instances of this threat. It'll clean them all up in one fell swoop for you in a matter of a couple clicks. John, anything you want to add here?
No, right there where you see apply all instances of this threat. So if you had a mass campaign, what this does, instead of having to go into each one of those instances individually, you can choose right here to apply to all, and it's going to mitigate all instances of that threat that it found in your network. So you're not going to see tons of alerts around that. You'll get more of a storyline, but that's what you're seeing here.
And then here in the bottom left, you can see why that Sentinel-1 killed the connection from interpreter to the compromised system. On the bottom left, you'll see that the reason is that it died, and that was because of the remediation actions taking place. And then now you can see that our files have been restored to the previous state. So you're not losing any of that data on those files. We're able to recover them in a few clicks of a button, and then we're able to do the full cleanup of the ransomware on your machines, so that now within a matter of a few minutes, you're able to go back to business operations, and the machine's protected. Um,
Yeah, so in
any
those scenarios where we talked about how long it takes to recover from a ransomware attack, anywhere from 21 days average to over a month. In this scenario with Sentinel-1, you're recovered in just a few minutes rather than a few weeks or months.
All right. Right before I turn it over to Wade, just want to talk a little bit about our services. So here at First Watch, we do provide a managed detection and response. We use Sentinel-1 as our EDR solution on it, and so contains both an EPP and an EDR and our MDR service on one executable that you can deploy through your favorite RMM, so it can be installed within a few clicks of a button. We pride ourselves really on the remediation, where that's where we want to do the full cleanup for you, going in, cleaning all the malicious code, cleaning up any behaviors. We write custom content that sits on top of Sentinel-1 looking for those malicious behaviors, right? Especially where you have the ransomware actors that are trying to move laterally off that living off the land techniques. And then secondly is we're going to we can configure Sentinel-1 for your MSP, so it's unique to your environment, and specific to your vertical, to make sure it ensure and works properly, without any hiccups or any hindrance to your end clients. I know we are at time, so I'm going to push it over to the next slide and ask Wade to come back for Q&A.
Thank you, Fabian and John. I appreciate that overview and education there on the solution. A couple of questions have come through that we'll hit before we dive into the big rewarded question. If there are anybody that's out there that's going to do that. First of all, one of the questions around the MXDR, a question was, will the MXDR integrate with our existing security stack? And do you guys basically come in and integrate with what we currently have for our clients' infrastructure?
So yes, it will. We can be installed side by side if you have your own EDR in place, or we could swap it out for ours. Granted, if you had something, let's say like Proofpoint and other security tools, we can add that into our MXDR, so that they work in conjunction with each other, and we'll write content for you on that end. Um, the one thing that I would be cautious on is the actual EDR. Not all of them are created equal, and the way we do our deep analysis, we need that raw content visibility. So as long as it provides that functionality, we can work in conjunction with it.
Okay. And then another one says, Is the latest threat intelligence embedded into the MXDR?"
Yes, absolutely. And so that's part of the cloud functionality is one of the benefits of all Sentinel-1 clients actually go to the cloud when they identify something malicious, and so that's the benefit of it. And then we can port in threat intel, and then thirdly, our team actually does a lot of threat intelligence. So we do a lot of threat emulation. Where there's simulations for how different threat actors and APT groups work out there. We're always running the latest, greatest piece of malware that gets released into the wild. And then we do a heavily set of open source intelligence as well that gets applied to our service.
Okay, good. And a few of these questions I believe was answered. So I'm not going to repeat them because I know the answer was given. But a couple of more here, real quick. Is AI used to optimize detection and ensure the scalability of your platform?
Yes, absolutely. And so the AI is built into our EPP side of it. Um, as for our side, we use some more machine learning just because it's based on behavioral based actions on each individual. But yes, it does have AI built into our solution.
Okay, all right. And the last question I have, other than a statement that I'm going to kind of read, is what differentiates First Watch from other providers of your caliber?
Yeah, good question. So it's actually the human element, right? Because anybody can go buy a technology and put it in there. However, if you don't configure the technology correctly for the environment, and have that cyber expertise, and so really it's that human element is where we differentiate ourselves, being able to threat hunt, write custom content unique to your environment, to identify those living off the land techniques. And then lastly, our entire team comes from the digital forensics incident response programs and offerings in the past. So we all used to have to do the boots on the ground, going everywhere. But thanks to technology now, we can sit at home and deploy our agents and do all of our work instantly. So stuff that used to take weeks for people to do, we can do a matter of minutes and a deep dive analysis for them now. But it's really that human element that we pride ourselves on.
And I believe another differentiator from what I've learned with all the different suppliers that we deal with is you also have the element on the instant response side when it comes to even breaches for other, the independent individual person, client, people, individual, not just the organization, which is pretty big ecosystem when you look at the grand scheme of things.
Absolutely, Wade, and that's actually another feature that we're bringing in that we haven't seen on any other MDRs is we're actually bringing that forensics capability to our clients as part of our MDR, our pro offering, where we can go in and do enterprise forensics for your organizations to determine the who, what, when, where, why, and provide a full analysis on each incident and giving a root cause analysis on it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then a couple of things that was and very spot on is we do a lot of healthcare. Your healthcare hospitals are very much more complicated than your traditional your standard organization. EMRs, as Jack pointed out, cannot be just rolled forward. So there's a lot of different things in healthcare, and then cyber insurance you also dictates response sequences and involvement, and that's across the board. So any comments on what you would play in a healthcare situation or scenario?
Absolutely, good question. So that's really where it comes down to our continuous monitoring and that human element, right? So for the most part, typically when people get hit with ransomware, unfortunately the threat actor's been in their environment for quite some time, and so unfortunately that means signs were missed, right? And things should have been detected, and really that's where we're priding ourselves is we want to shrink that dwell time. So the dwell time is the time from when it gets infected till somebody finds it. And um, post solar winds breach, jumped up to about a year time frame. And so we're really trying to shrink that down to a matter of minutes, having that dwell time when a threat actor can be in your environment so that we can stop it before the ransomware actually occurs. And so it's really it on those behavioral based detections and the human element, for those healthcare providers, especially since, just like you said, it's difficult to be able to do that rollback with some of the EMR systems, and you don't want to lose any data. That's really where the bread and butter is to be able to do that continuous monitoring and catch it earlier.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, good deal. Well, thanks a lot. Well, listen, as we wrap up, we've got one final thing here. We've got, and I've vetted everyone here. I believe everything is qualified here. No worries on the qualification. But the question we're going to pose is, if you've got one, come up with it. Now's the time to ask that. Um, and this is a $500 question. If you can stump Fabian or John here on our expert panel, we're specifically around MDR, MXDR, and ransomware. It's got to be that specific, question. And if you can come up with a question that they can't answer or can stump them, then First Watch is going to basically hand out a $500 reward on that. So if there's any takers on that, we'll take your question now. Tough question. Okay. I'm going to take the silence as that you guys did a great job. Good deal. Okay. All right then. Well, listen, as we wrap things up, again, I want to say thanks a lot. Great information. This is something that we all deal with, whether you're a client or an MSP or even an individual. Everybody's dealing with it now. And great to have companies like you guys. Thank you for being a supplier in our portfolio and providing the education to our partners, as well as for our partners for their clients and our clients, and all for the greater cause. So I'm going to turn it. Anybody else got anything we want to add before we close this out?
The only thing to add, Wade, is want to put a note out there about our next webinar, the future of cybersecurity trends and emerging threats that will be coming in the future.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I will be sending out this recording to all the participants and beyond. Feel free to share it to whomever you'd like to share this with, and reach out to learn a little bit more on First Watch Cyber Solutions. And thank you all for your attendance today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Take care.